this is part of the Second International Congress on Consciousness, and I have a great pleasure to be here now talking to Dr. Jim Tucker. I'm a great admirer of his work. Many of you might have already heard about his research on children who have experienced that points to the existence of past lives, so somehow they have some type of past life recall, and I would love to hear more about it directly from the source. Jim just gave us a very nice talk today, so let's hear a little bit about it. But if you don't mind,
Sure.
I would love to ask you a little bit of the backstage of it, how all of this started. I know you started working with Dr. Ian Stevenson, but how did you feel about it in the beginning, or was there some other event there that was, markedly pointing you towards this direction?
Yeah.
What was it, please?
Well, of course, Ian had been doing this work for a long time when I got involved. I did my training in psychiatry and child psychiatry at the University of Virginia, and I heard about Ian during that time, but I never actually met him. And then afterwards, I was in private practice, but continuing to live in Charlottesville, where the university is. When my wife and I got together, she was more open to these sorts of things than I was. And then I was feeling a little bit unfulfilled by my private practice when we saw in the local paper that Dr. Stevenson's research division had gotten a grant to do a new study on near-death experiences. And I decided just to call them to see if they needed help, volunteer help, interviewing patients for that study, just looking for kind of a hobby to go along with my practice.
Something in a different area, maybe.
Yeah, just for maybe a few hours a week kind of thing.
A little bit.
Yes, and at the time, as luck would have it, I was reading one of Dr. Stevenson's books, so I had gotten intrigued by it, and then I did call them up, and they said they might need help, so I started going there. And actually, as it turned out, I never participated in that study, but it did get me connected with Dr. Stevenson and his research division, and I just started going an hour or two a week just to talk. They had a research meeting each week that I would go to and listen. And anyway, eventually Dr. Stevenson asked me if I wanted to look into cases of children talking about past lives. We studied an American case together, and then he asked me if I wanted to go meet a colleague in Asia to study cases there, and things took off from there. Eventually I stopped my private practice and came on at the university full time, and I've been there ever since.
Yes. And this research you do now, it's under the University of Virginia, right?
Yes,
so it's
yeah.
As part of the program there.
That's
That is
right.
very interesting, very interesting.
Yeah.
And you as a psychiatrist, I think it's very important, because then it gets, not only gives a lot of credibility, I don't think that is the point, but I think being able to evaluate the sanity of what is being described and who is involved. And I see that sometimes a little bit of, how would I put it, belief. People have their belief system may interfere a little bit with the interpretation.
Sure. Yeah.
And one thing is the interpretation, another thing is the experience as it happens. So maybe when you hear from the children, you get it more directly without the interpretation. What could you tell us about this, Jim?
Yeah, well, that part is tricky because the children often don't really want to talk to us about it.
Yes.
So sometimes they do. I mean, sometimes they will warm up.
Yes.
But a lot of times we are dependent on the parents reporting to us what the children have said. I'm studying a case now where the child is actively talking about these things. So the mom has been recording them.
How old is this child?
He is 4.
4.
So mom is making recordings on her phone and then sending them to me, emailing them to me. So it's great to, even though, I mean, if I were there, he might not be saying anything, but to her, he is. So I'm getting to assess things that way. And you're right, I mean, I remain very much a child psychiatrist. I still spend a lot of time in the clinic, either seeing patients or supervising their care. So it remains a part of my identification along with doing this this research, and I think the two complement each other well.
Yes, I think it's perfect match actually. You know that I'm doing a study on kids.
Yes, I do.
And what I'm studying is not the same. I'm trying to kind of make an exploratory study to see what sort of phenomena kids would experience, because of course recalling past life is much rarer. It's kind of rare, but there are other things that reported so much more often. So the thing is, how can we create some sort of criteria to demarcate what is just fantasy and what there's some foundation, some basis to it, and that's very hard. So I can totally understand. Do you find that sometimes it would come to you an account, a report that you see and you think this is not consistent, it doesn't make sense, there is nothing here?
Yeah, and I mean, there are a lot of them where the child will say some things about a past life, but they're completely unverifiable, where if the children don't give details like names of places or people, then it's very hard to separate it from fantasy unless you're able to do that verification. So that's really our big emphasis. But also, like you're asking, there are times where what the child says just sounds much more like fantasy than any sort of
somehow
reality.
there are details that you can tell,
and some of them are quite fantastical about being, I don't know, kings or queens or these adventures that really don't sound like a past life.
I assume it's much easier to imagine to being a king, a queen, or something of these recent movies and all of this fantasy, anime children watch nowadays, but maybe very few of them would say, I was just working with agriculture or something like that, right?
Well, that's right. It seems to be a completely different kind of phenomenon. And the parents say that they can tell the difference. That there are times where the children would be talking about dinosaurs or fairies or whatever, and it's very different from when they get very serious and talk about these things.
There is something else there. What would be an interesting case, maybe that you have been studying, that you could tell us about?
Well, of course, there are the ones that I include in my talk.
Yes, please share one of them with us if you would like.
Sure. Well, the one that comes to mind is there's a little boy named Ryan where his mom sent us a letter actually from Oklahoma because he was 5 and he was talking about a past life in Hollywood. In fact, every day he would cry about how much he missed his life in Hollywood.
Wow.
And eventually she got some books on Hollywood to try to help him kind of process this stuff. But there was a picture from an old movie, and he pointed to one of the guys in the picture and said that's who he had been in his past life. So then she wrote me to see if I could help figure out who this person was. It turned out the guy he pointed to was an extra with no lines in the movie. So it was very hard to identify him. Eventually, with the help of a Hollywood archivist, we were able to identify him only because she went to the library of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences and got materials. There's no way that the family did this online. But it turned out that over 50 of Ryan's statements about his past life matched with this guy that he had pointed to. Including things like he said how he had danced on stage in New York and this guy had danced on Broadway. Then he went to work in the movies and he worked for an agency and this guy started a talent agency. He even said that the street name of his house had the word rock or mount in it, and this guy lived on Roxbury. So there were all these details that would have been impossible for the family to have kind of fed him or for him to have seen by accident, yet they all matched this one guy that he pointed to in the picture.
Yes, of course. And if it were somebody famous, maybe he could have got that from somewhere, but being someone unknown, it's a point there that is a strong point.
Sometimes we do hear from parents where they think their child is someone famous reborn, and I think we should assess those cases, but we have much more reason to be concerned that the families have found the information through some sort of normal means compared to a case like this.
And even unknowingly creating that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not necessarily doing that on purpose, but it's all around the information. But when it's something that nobody knows, that's so much stronger. I've heard a case you told, I think I saw an interview with you or something about a boy that remember he was a Japanese guy that died on the war or something?
It was a child who remembered being an American pilot who was shot down by the Japanese.
Yes.
Yes,
that's true.
That's another excellent case. A little boy named James Leininger, whose parents eventually wrote a book about their experiences. But yes, I mean, from the age of 2 to 4, he talked a great deal about being a pilot who had been shot down. He said at Iwo Jima, he gave the name of the ship, Natoma, which is a strange name for an American U.S. aircraft carrier.
Yes, of course.
And anyway, he gave a number of details. We've got very good documentation of those, and then they all fit for this one particular guy who was killed from the USS Natoma Bay.
Yes, if I am remembering correct, even the name of some of colleagues that were at the same time, he could
That's right.
mention.
Yeah.
So that is
Yeah.
awesome. I'm going to ask you a terrible question.
Okay. I'll try to give a terrible answer.
How do you think all of that enlighten us about consciousness, life? What does that teach us? Because of course what you are doing is so important study with so maybe big ramifications, and we are in a moment in our scientific process that we hopefully, I would like to think so, we are getting more open to study serious cases like this.
Yeah.
One thing that I think is unfortunate is that sometimes non-serious cases and things that are not well researched just enter in the process and destroy the credibility of the serious studies that had been done.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, there are many serious studies and many people, really wanting to do real science with all of these. I'd like to include myself among them. So, but what does that give you an idea about life or whatever? I want to hear from you.
Well, I think it's certainly evidence that goes along with evidence in other areas that consciousness can continue after the brain dies. In our cases, it seems that it has continued on in another life. And if that's true, then really it upends, overturns the idea of scientific materialism, that this material world is all there is, because if there were just the physical world, then it would mean consciousness is created by the physical brain, and when the brain dies, the consciousness ends, and yet we have this evidence, in fact, the consciousness doesn't always end. So that to me suggests that we need to rethink our whole understanding of reality and consider consciousness separate from the physical.
Yes, so it's a whole paradigm change in all senses, actually, right?
Yeah.
Because not only scientifically, but for the whole basis of our lives. Because some people believe in that, but it's more a belief than anything else. But knowing it, I think it changed a lot.
Yeah, and in a way, it's a chance to bring together sort of science and spirituality, and hopefully create a new, clearer understanding of what reality really involves.
Yeah, that would be very interesting if we could come to stronger, but not only stronger, but maybe more ample dissemination of all of that, more participation from other areas. That would be really interesting. The Congress, I think, has been interesting for that, because we have a blend of different views, different studies, all of them in an effort to try to understand more about consciousness and what is this we are doing here, who we are we part of the brain, are we something else? That's fantastic.
Well, that's right, and whether we'll pull all the pieces together and prove that we need a new paradigm, we may have to wait until our next lives to do that. But it's progress kind of one step at a time, and I think the varied talks in this conference show that there are a lot of interesting kinds of work going on that point to, again, more than just physical reality existing.
Yes, from different angles. Absolutely. That
Yeah.
has been great. Is there anything you would like to add, Jim? You're fine with what you said?
No.
Something? Yes? No?
I think we said
That
good.
was great. I thank you so much for your time and for being here with us and being the Congress and everything.
well.
So, and I wish you all the best for your work.
Well, thank you.
And I'm sure it will be like
It's
that.
been a real pleasure to be here.
It's been very nice. And for all of you who are watching, if you want to know more about Dr. Jim Tucker's paper and his work, you can access all of what he presented here through the Proceedings. This will be in the Journal of Consciousness. So the Proceedings of the Second International Congress on Consciousness will be available, okay? Thank you very much. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.